I consider that I'm really lucky in speaking today because I had a wonderful segue into my area by Tim Brailsford in his introduction this morning when he talked about when he mentioned that there was no effective student voice. I also, at the last presentation that I gave, which was at a satellite session at the Universities Australia Conference, I had another great segue by Anthony McLaren, who is now the CEO of TEXA and was previously CEO of the Quality Assurance Agency in the UK, and was partly responsible for the National Code, which has a whole chapter, Chapter B5, which sets out the principles of student engagement in university decision making. So I also had Ali, who was talking about off-campus students and how do you get a sense of belonging, and of course Linda with her breakfast meetings talking about getting students' views, postgraduate students' views. I think it's no accident that these things are all happening. I think, and I've say this often, I think it's an idea whose time has come in Australia, and it's an idea which has become well embedded. The more effective processes for student engagement and the concept of student partnership is now much better embedded in other countries, such as the UK with the Student Engagement Partnership, Scotland with the Student Sparks, the Student Participation and Quality Scotland, and in New Zealand with the work that Ako Aotearoa is doing with student engagement in tertiary settings. I think my big thesis is that Australia needs to get much more involved, to take this much more seriously, to keep up or to become part of the world in this area. This I use this quote a lot because I love it, and I think it actually sums up what drives me. And I think this word passion is overused today, but it is my passion, and the impetus for my work. I have to declare also that my research into the university-student relationship has actually covered a lot of discussion of students as consumers, and I think that the bottom line is, and as far as that should go, is that universities need to be honest in the way that they relate to their students. And I think that's about as far as the student-consumer analogy should go. I don't think it does anybody, the students or universities, a service to take it any further. The student-centred learning is the big talk these days. We're all about student-centred learning, and there's been lots of talk about this today. And there's a rising tide of discussion relating to student engagement and curriculum design, in course quality enhancement, in learning innovation. And this project really embraces the knowledge and the principles emerging from all of this research, but goes a lot wider. I've leapt ahead really. One thing I needed to do at the beginning, or there were two things I wanted to do at the beginning. One was to acknowledge my team. We are a single university project, and I'd like to acknowledge and thank OLT for believing in us to allow us to proceed in this area. As a single university project, I have one member of my team here, Bronwyn Olive, but there are two other team members, Anne Cahill, who is our wonderful Policy Research Project Manager, and Katrina Waite. The other thing I wanted to do right at the beginning is to dispel something that was it was written by Julie Hare, who we all know and love, in the Higher Education Supplement, following one of my talks somewhere when she interviewed me. And I said to her, please do not upset the students. Students are very important to my project. I need the engagement, obviously, of students. And it's a very good article, but it has a very unfortunate headline. And I wanted to say that actually I turned that around. I think that what we should be thinking is, the correct way to look at it is, what are we as universities, as university management, as academics, as professional staff in universities, what are we not doing? What should we be doing to engage students a lot more than we do now? We think that, and when you talk to universities, they say, yes, we engage students, we have student views, we have 6 students on academic board and 2 on council and whatever. And that's as far as it goes. And I think that to me, tokenism is probably worse. Token engagement is worse than no engagement at all. So we need to be thinking, oh my goodness, we need to be thinking about how we can better work on processes to better engage students. And I started off, I'm going to work really quickly through this. I never learn to speak more slowly and say less, but I start to speed up because I get very excited about it. But this is the way we're approaching our project. We're at the stage of completing lots of case studies. Interestingly enough, we surveyed universities. We didn't actually find very much from our surveys. We found that they had a number of students on academic boards and other committees and whatever. It is through my doing a roadshow really and talking at conferences, at meetings like this, at seminars, that people have approached us and said, funnily enough from the same universities that said that their only engagement was students on academic board, people have approached us and told us about wonderful things that they are doing at their universities, which have now become our case studies. And I have to say that there is a lot going on around Australia. There's a lot of pockets of student engagement and really interesting innovations. Those are our provisions. The latest one, which comes into effect in January, the only provision we have in our provider standards compared to a whole set of principles, a whole chapter in the UK relating to student partnership or student engagement. So I started, as chair of academic board, as I said, we had 8 students on our academic board, and I found it really hard to engage them. And I thought, that's what really got me going in this project. I thought, what happens? I'd read a couple of PhDs of people, one in South Africa and one in the UK, of student partnership ideas. And so I started looking at, and then I came across the whole Sparks thing and the student engagement partnership in the UK and what Ako Aotearoa is doing. And there was a lot of themes through my research, and I went over to the UK and worked with Gwen van der Welden from Bath University, who had done a project commissioned by QAA on student engagement. And there were some very clear themes that came through. One was, it is absolutely important that it's vital that there's an institutional commitment to and respect for student voice if it's going to get any further than just being token. And that involves things like training for student representatives, ongoing briefing and support for student representatives, starting a culture of student representation from I hesitate to say from the bottom, from the beginning, the first year courses, by having course representatives elected who represent the students' views and are the liaison with the academic staff members, the course coordinators. Information provided right at the beginning for course representatives and also for the academics who are dealing with the course representatives in the courses that they convene. Information about possibilities for student representation from the very beginning, from induction, when students first walk into the university campus. And importantly, which brings me on to what I'm doing here, I suppose, representation from all cohorts, Indigenous, full-time, part-time, and representation from, I don't know why I haven't got postgraduate there. Indigenous, it's a very big omission, I apologise. International, Indigenous, offshore, part-time, full-time, postgraduate. And also, if we're going to go further, student representation on national bodies. What has been shown in the UK and in the other countries where student partnership is much more embedded is that it's not only of benefit to the universities, but it is part of what we're doing as universities. And I mentioned this before, that we're not just so much teaching disciplines now, we're all about transdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary. We're helping to develop leaders and thinkers and citizens in society, because who knows what professions they're going to be engaged in or what work they're going to be engaged in down the line. Okay, so questions now, bringing it into the postgraduate era. Questions to consider. How does your institution see postgraduate student participation? So I'd just like to throw a few things at you. The engagement of postgraduates are a huge cohort, as we've been hearing about today, who, in terms of their voice, are largely invisible, but they have a huge amount that they could be contributing towards university course enhancement, etc. How do student leaders see themselves? Across the board, I see that as a very interesting difference in Australia between student leaders in universities and national student leaders between here and in European countries and in the UK. Are they leaders of the whole student representative body is a big question. Incentives. What incentives should we have for engaging students in a partnership with us as universities, for using their views? Because obviously that's really important. Postgraduate students particularly are hugely busy. Often they have they're holding down jobs, families, and doing lots of other things as well. And what sort of incentives? Should it be incentives in terms of recognition or financial incentives, or what, is a question that we've been looking at. And importantly, what we need to be thinking about is postgraduate students as partners working with the university to enhance quality and standards and design courses and improve the student experience, which is what we're all about here. Okay, nationally, should there be, and this is where I would like our project to take us as we conclude in September. We have a big symposium in September where we have representatives from Sparks, hopefully, and from the UK and from New Zealand coming to talk about their experiences. And of course we will have the engagement of large numbers of student groups, postgraduate and undergraduate. That's on the 5th of September, so put it in your diary. And then we will be reporting, but what I would like to move forward to is a sector-wide collaboration to reach a common understanding of what is student engagement, what is student partnership, and how can it be advanced in Australia the way it has in the rest of the world. Should we embrace the principles guiding student engagement partnership provided for in policy in the UK in Chapter 5, as I said? Should we formulate a student engagement framework based on this shared understanding through a collaboration with the whole sector, through university managers, academics, and importantly, students, postgraduate and undergraduate students? And should we have bodies like the Student Engagement Partnership, which is a partnership between the National Union of Students, the Quality Assurance Agency, Higher Education UK and the Higher Education Funding Council. Interestingly enough, the Higher Education, Anthony will probably know more about this, Funding Council is about to be disbanded, and it's going to be called something like the Council for Students.
Office for Students.
Office for Students,
yeah.
Which I think is fantastic, putting students at the heart of what we do. Yes, so I think I'm probably run out of time, but we hope that you will join us in continuing the student voice conversation. We have a Facebook page, and we have a Facebook site, and we have a web page as well, or you can contact us. But to further the conversation, to get towards the collaboration, to reach a common understanding, then we require input from all of you, particularly students, but all members of the university communities. Okay, the most important question, I suppose, is who do universities serve? And I think that guides what my passion and my drive in this area. Thank you. Kia ora.